Welcome to the Big Screen Symposium 2017 podcast. The Big Screen Symposium took place in Auckland on the 30th of September and 1st of October. Please note, while many of the speakers used clips in their sessions, we've edited these out to better suit the podcast. Award-winning filmmaker David Michôd shares details of his directing and writing process in this intimate chat with Shuchi Kothari. David is refreshingly candid about how he's carved out a career in this challenging field.
So you talked in the earlier session, David, which was only 15 people, so I don't mind us repeating that part, but you talked about how Animal Kingdom was 10 years in the making, that was a 10-year project. You wrote it and you rewrote it and you rewrote it and then you were ready to shoot it. Can you talk to us a little bit just about that kernel of truth, that gem you spoke about, that how you found that one line and that became the thing of the movie?
That one line being the
young man finding him. Yeah.
Well, okay. So I'll just tell the whole story.
Okay, tell the whole story then.
So Animal Kingdom was the first thing that I wrote when I finished film school. And I came out of film school not really knowing... I didn't know... Well, the first thing I didn't know was that I didn't know how to have a career as a filmmaker. I didn't know what to do. Film school was so joyous and fun, and you felt like, you were there and that's what you got up every morning. It was like your job was to just go and either learn about films or make films or whatever. And then that year, because I did a postgrad, and when that year ended, I suddenly had no idea. I didn't know what to do with myself. The only thing I knew to do was to write. And so I started doing that. The reason Animal Kingdom took 10 years to write was because I discovered quite quickly when I started writing that I didn't know how to do it. And I spent 10 years teaching myself how to, and by trial and error. And over the course of those 10 years, I threw the script out maybe 4 or 5 times and started again from scratch. And as painful as that was, but there was a couple of people around me who's, beautiful people who were acting in a kind of, it's almost script editor capacity, who'd say to me, you know what, I think you should try this. It's going to hurt, but do it. Throw the whole thing away and start from scratch. And so I did that. And I actually, by the end, I did it another couple of times off my own bat because I just could feel the benefit. I could feel that my writing had improved so much, between certain periods that there was really no point in me just tinkering around with what I already had, that I'd be better off starting from a blank canvas. But one of the key things that happened in that was, the very first draft. I still have the first draft of Animal Kingdom sitting on my bookshelf, and I love it because it's so terrible. But the thing I love most about it is that there is literally not a single line of dialogue, not a single scene in that first draft that's still in the movie.
Isn't that amazing?
And that first draft was... the reason it was bad was because I came out of film school, didn't know what I was doing. I made the mistake that, I think probably lots of people have made at one point or another, is you go, okay, I'm gonna write a script. So you open your computer and if you're lucky enough to, back at that early nascent stage in your career, to have final draft, you open your final draft and then you just go, I don't know, interior room, and you don't know what you're writing and you just start. And then, and back then I was in my early 20s and it was, and so I was, and I was basically through misadventure, I would also call myself an emotionally immature person. I just started writing, basically they were just gangsters saying cool things and stuff. It was just it was bad. But there were enough people around me, at Screen New South Wales or where, I remember getting an $11,000 development check. The most money I'd ever seen in my life. And it was the financial aspect was very exciting, but almost more important was that little approbation, getting that little thing, someone saying, look, keep going, keep trying. We think you think it's worth your while. Don't throw it in just yet. That was good. But anyway, so one of the key moments for me in that whole process of the maturity part once I'd gotten rid of it's just the working out what the movie is actually about. Like, why am I making it? What is this movie about? And for me, at a certain point, I kind of realized, certainly when I first started writing that early version that was just gangsters saying stuff, and I didn't have a kid at the center. It was very loosely based on a real story. It was based on the Pettingill family and their relationship with the armed robbery squad in Melbourne in Melbourne in the 80s. And there was a kid who was a part of that family who turned Crown witness against the family, but early on I didn't know that just something about him made me feel like that this kid needs to be the central character. I'm not quite sure why. It just feels like And then at a certain point I realised that I think the reason why what's fascinating me about this is how. Is that I think this movie is about how a young man forms for himself a moral compass in a morally corrupt world. And as soon as you have that sense of what the movie is actually about, then the structure starts to take a shape.
And when you were doing this, because, you talk about that process of arriving at that guiding light, that one line that says, this is my film, this is what it's about. Are you also wearing a directorial hat at the same time? Or do you work in this, some writer-directors work in this rather linear way where they say, I'm writing, and then when the writing is done, I'm kind of moving into directorial mode. How does it work for you?
You have to demarcate to a certain extent, obviously, because there are certain just the practical logistics of. But no, I'd start. I have learnt now, and especially since Animal Kingdom, and looking at, reading scripts that get sent to me, and the couple of little things I've done in the world of TV where I've directed things that I haven't written myself. That I've now very firmly come to realise that it's actually. The directing begins when I'm writing, and the writing continues through the directing. I never stop the writing, and it certainly continues again apace when you're editing. It's basically writing. I'm back with my writer's brain again. And all of that stuff, it starts when I'm writing. When I'm writing, that's when I start hearing the music of the movie, and I'll start building playlists of pieces of music, and then that starts to inform. I'm definitely going to ask you
about that a bit later on, because for those of you who've seen David's work, music features as such a absolutely kind of integral part of storytelling and emotion building, and it's very peculiar in particular, and sound design too. So I'll reserve that for a bit later, and then maybe you can talk about Animal Kingdom and Rover and War Machine together. So back to Animal Kingdom, you got your script, you wrote. Did you have a few people in mind when you were writing, in terms of casting the film, how you kind of approached the characters and Pope and Janine, and I don't know who else you had in mind as.
Yeah, I knew that I wanted to. I wrote Ben Mendelsohn and Jackie Weaver's characters for them, and then a little bit later, just a little bit later.
From the beginning.
Really early. I can't even remember whether or not it was 10 years before I made it, but it was very,
that's pretty
very
amazing
early.
that you were so clear 10 years before you actually shot, that you're writing for these actors in particular.
It is kind of a bit strange as well when you think that I don't know that Ben would have even been old enough to play that character back when I started writing. I just liked the idea of. Mendelsohn was so ripe to play that character. He was so good at what he does. And had built a career on the back of playing kind of sort of, graphish, larrikin boys. But, I knew him socially, and there was just a dangerous man in there. And I hadn't seen that dangerous man on screen.
And that dangerous man was very much part of what you I mean, that danger, that menace is what laces the film from the beginning to end. There's no relenting, there's no ease, there is no way to escape, there's no little side scene where we can just rest a little bit before the menace comes back. You kept that danger from beginning to end. How do you achieve that as a director?
With Ben or generally?
No, generally. I mean, Ben is a big part of it, but you kept it with everyone, you know, where there was no way to relax and go, okay, this is in a convention of storytelling, the moment where I can breathe a little bit before things get, you know, tense again. Animal Kingdom is very compressedly, densely tense. And I think, how do you direct something like that? Because 5-week shoot, was it? 5 weeks you took to
35 days.
35 days.
7 weeks.
So how do you keep that energy for 35 days?
The energy itself isn't, you know, you don't turn up to work every morning and get really tense. You know, I knew when I was writing, you know, it's one of those questions you get asked, and you get asked it, you know, what is it about this movie that will make it different from other movies that might be something like it? That's just a natural question you get asked when you're trying to get something up. But I also had come to discover that the flavour of the movie wasn't necessarily clear on the page. You know, I would give people the script to read, and they would. Sorry, I'm just aware. I've got my back turned to this side. I'd give people the script to read, and they would, and I'd realise, that some people think this is going to be like a Tarantino movie, or some people think it's going to be like a Guy Ritchie movie, or, and you know, in some ways it was quite useful for me in realising that I had a responsibility to communicate to people what kind of film it was. That was part of the reason why I made the short crossbow that I made before I made Animal Kingdom, was just to give some sense of tone. But I was excited about the prospect of making a crime film that took itself very seriously and that was actually all about anxiety. That was the thing that always fascinated me about the stories that I read, true crime stories, was imagining what the lives of those people leading them felt like. I mean, I get the impression that they don't experience the way I would, which is just be like freaking out all the time, you know. But that stuff must be bubbling underneath the surface somewhere, you know, just a constant feeling of something bad being about to happen.
I'd like for us to see a clip maybe from the film. There's 2 clips from Animal Kingdom, and we can then talk about creating some of those, you know, decisions you took around creating certain scenes. One is in relation to backstory, and the other is in relation to Janine's character in a very male world. But we watch the clips first.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's the beginning of Animal Kingdom.
I haven't watched that in a while.
You haven't seen that in a while?
Last time I watched actually that, I didn't watch much more, was probably about 4 years ago, and I was in the back of a taxi in Bali with my girlfriend Mira and Joel Edgerton, and we'd bought a pirated copy of it, and we were stuck in a traffic jam. And we watched it.
It's such a fabulous opening. It's a fabulous opening for so many reasons, and it's such a carefully crafted film. And to think that she's there to comfort him at the start, and in the way that he comforts her at the end, in this very beautifully bookended journey of this young man. It's very economical, what you chose to do. And I like what you said earlier, that this was not how it perhaps was going to open initially, that you arrived at this for a reason as this...
Not even initially, even just... I mean, not only initially, also even right up until the very end. I mean, I ended up, like, I remember on the last day, the last day of the edit, actually having a big fight with my editor, because he'd had an idea, basically the last day of the the last day of the edit that we should chop the front of the movie off. That we just needed to get into it fast, and it needed to have some pace. And the thing is, the movie is it's tense, but it's languid too. And that we needed to get into it faster, and that really you're not learning anything you don't need to know. You're not learning anything you need to know in the opening there. So let's just chop it off, get straight into the guts of the movie and stuff. And I went like, oh, okay, wow, I need a weekend to think about this. So I had the weekend, and I got to the end of it, and I walked in on Monday morning. I was just like, no, it's crazy. The beginning has to stay there because that circularity of it is so important. The movie needs to start the way it ends, It basically begins with a hug between those two characters, and it ends with that, and yet everything is different. So that made that decision.
And also kind of very quickly being able to give your audience where Josh comes from, right? Because we never go back into his life once he's with the grandmother. So this was our only way of knowing where he came from. And it was such a beautiful, condensed way.
And so you need to pack information into that, because it did feel to me like you did need to know, to the extent that the movie is it's a story about a kid, a young man forming a moral compass in a morally toxic world. But it's also a kind of fish out of water story. And in order to tell a story like that, you need to know where that fish is. You need to know it's a fish. You know what I mean? And so, it's like I didn't want to make a film about a sweet little kid who gets thrown into, it's like it didn't ring true to me. It's like these kids, quite often they start, there is raw material there. And it was important to me that you get a sense that he had grown, that his very beginnings were in a kind of strange...
he's damaged in a way that it doesn't all happen.
Morally toxic soup of its own sort. And yet there are little hints in there of, that he's going to school still. He's got a school uniform on. I don't know if anyone even notices this, but he's wearing one rubber washing up glove. So, basically in my mind, he's been doing the washing up, and he's been talking, and she's stopped making noises. He's had to take one of them off to check her pulse and to operate the phone. But, that he was in the middle of basically doing the housework, for his mother, though, who is wearing, from memory, she's wearing like a nurse's uniform or something. Yeah. She was trying. Yeah. But, it's just so that very, very quickly you create a little picture of what he left, where he came from, and how compromised it was from the very
beginning. This is at the risk of repeating some stuff from the earlier session, but I found it fascinating, and, there's most of you weren't there. But you talked about your complicated relationship with rehearsals. And can you tell us a little bit about how you rehearsed Animal Kingdom? How did, once you had cast it, you had everyone together, what was your rehearsal process? And then maybe how that's changed over the years. Do you do things differently? There's not, all I was, saying to 15 people as opposed to how many there are here now this morning was that I don't do it properly. I was being confessional this morning. No, but I don't mean the not properly part. I was actually referring to the fact that how you spend time with actors not over script, but over that world, not over lines, but over who they were.
I'm saying I don't do that yet. I'm saying I know that I need to start doing that because I've made the mistake the mistake I made on Animal Kingdom was that I got into a room I just really didn't know how to rehearse. And I had read a couple of books by Judith Weston that were really great. I really believe in that, her, the script analysis.
Breaking the script down from a director's
and just turning it into something that you understand and that is then playable that stuff is incredibly useful. But I still it was basically like practical logistics that threw me off when I walked into the rehearsal room for Animal Kingdom, because it's like you walk in and then you go, okay, it's Monday, first day of rehearsal, but you don't have the whole cast. You've only got Mendelsohn and Sullivan Stapleton and James Freshville, and that's all you've got. And you go, well, I don't know, what do I do with that? And so I remember there was one day when all I had was Mendelsohn, Jackie Weaver, and Luke Ford, who plays the younger brother. And I went, okay, so I guess I'll just find the first scene in the movie that has all three of them in it. And so I flipped through the script and then found that scene on page 87. So it's the scene where she goes to visit them in jail. And so I went, okay, let's rehearse this scene. And it was ridiculous, because it's like, well, hang on a minute, what were we doing in the 87 pages before this? And, Mendelsohn lost his cool, and then he was throwing furniture around the room. And it became clear that what he and I needed to do was go and, so I then shut rehearsal down for 2 days, sat in his hotel room, and we just talked through the script, him and me. And it was, and that was, I'm glad that he, brought it to a head. Because other actors, I've been in that situation where, it's like other actors wouldn't have done that. They would have just went, oh, okay, I don't know what's going on, but it's not my place to do anything about it. And Ben forced me to shut rehearsal down for 2 days so that he could have special time, But the movie is better for it, It's like we talked in detail about, and he needed that special time. He is the alpha. He is the apex of that family, and he then took that special time and used it to torture the other actors.
That's what I came across an interview, I think, with James, the actor who played Josh, and he said that how much on his toes Ben kept him, because you would never know whether he was serious, not serious. Sometimes he would, joke with him, so you think, oh, he's my buddy, and then suddenly he would turn, and so he said it was a bit of a dance trying to.
Yeah, James got off lightly in a way, because Ben worked out early on that the thing he wanted to do with James was basically just ignore him, and spent the first 3 weeks of the shoot calling him Josh and stuff, just basically ignoring him. But it was the other brothers that got the, Ben is so outrageously intelligent. It was the other two guys, Luke Ford and Sullivan Stapleton, who bore the full brunt of Ben's psycho manipulation. It's kind of extraordinary. So to the extent that there were fist fights and people threatening to quit and it was all. It was kind of. There was someone this morning was asking in that thing about that scene in the kitchen where Ben's trying to just kind of goad Luke Ford into being a part of this murderous conspiracy and by questioning his sexuality and all that kind of stuff. And I forgot to mention this morning, that day was actually kind of extraordinary, because those guys weren't even talking to each other. And so to rehearse, I had to go off into a room separately with them so to do the lines. And then because Ben had tortured Luke, tortured him. And it was scary, but you get in there and you shoot it and you can just feel it. You can feel the loathing in that,
It's interesting, all three films deal with a question and masculinity. Animal Kingdom, Rover, and then War Machine. It's guys, a band of guys, but not in that kind of bravado, reward the, banter kind of guy movies that you see. You're actually kind of questioning what it is about this kind of behavior, this kind of way of being men, and where does kind of morality sit in this. So is this something you've always been interested in? I've not seen Crossbow. I really wish I had, the 2007 short, but I think that has a young male protagonist.
And it's about male sexuality in a way, or young adolescent sexuality.
So how is this, what is it about?
About men that I'm so interested in.
They gave me a very phallic mic to hold. I know Mira's gorgeous and she's in your life. This is not about that. I'm curious about what aspect of masculinity that fascinates you to keep returning to it.
I don't know. And believe me, I've thought about it a lot. I mean, I'm fascinated by delusional men. I'm not unaware of the fact that we live in a world that is largely run by delusional, sociopathic, narcissistic men. All right? And I find them fascinating. I find their delusion fascinating. I find their seeming lack of self-doubt fascinating. And it just happened. I've only made 3 movies, so I mean, there's another one I'm making next year, which is pretty much all about men. But in the...
when I asked you that yesterday, I suspected you would say that. I mean, because this is not some kind of just random, it just happened. This is obviously something you're teasing out. And whether you're doing it very self-consciously or not, it is very much...
I mean, I'm fascinated by that hubris and by the what I can only imagine are the kind of, it's like the fragile fortification of that stuff, what are what does the psychotopography look like underneath that front, whatever. But having said that, it's like sometimes, every now and then, someone will say to me, it's like your films are, you've got a problem with women, for instance, and it's like, and I always actually spend quite a lot of time thinking about I'm very aware of the fact that these worlds are worlds of men. So where and how do the women fit in that world?
Brilliant.
So that the movies become, in a way, for me, not about movies, and I know this might sound self-serving.
That's all right, go ahead.
But, the movies for me are very much aren't movies in which women are absent. They're about the absence of women, you know what I mean? Because they are. I mean, Animal Kingdom's actually full of women. There's women
in fact, I think your Janine character is incredible in that sense, that just the way that she positions herself in this family as this glue that holds the family together, but also the power that she does have in the family. I mean, it's a balance between her being very vulnerable, but also very, very strong in knowing her brood. And there's a scene with Janine talking to the lawyer, Wiley, is it? Wiley? Am I getting...
That's the actor's name, Dan Wiley.
Yeah, but what's his... Ezra. When she says that she wants to get rid of Josh. So in this world of men is a very, strong central woman character. And what was your decision in terms of making her play against type? Because this could have gone either ways in terms of how she's played Janine.
Yeah. No, Jackie assumed that would be... It was really important to me that I wanted because, the character that she plays is one of... she is a woman who has built her whole sense of self around the fact of her being... The power that she feels being at the center of a group of young, powerful, dangerous men. And so I wanted her to be a loving mother, she is the glue that holds that family together. I didn't want that character to be played like a kind of gruff, kind of Ma Barker matriarch. I wanted her to play as a loving mother and grandmother. Jackie didn't originally, she was surprised. I mean, that was why I cast Jackie, is because I wanted it. She's so tiny and she's so bubbly, and yet she's cunning, Yeah. She plays Jackie knows that she is these things and uses it to her advantage. There's like a very, very sharp intelligence underneath that seemingly naive, bubbly.
Would you like to maybe have a few questions at this point for David, and then we can talk a bit about War Machine?
I started to watch your film actually completely not knowing John and Mom, and I'd never seen anything before. And was thinking, oh, this looks like another bleak Australasian thing. Then I was sucked in. It's just like, this is an amazing film. I'm really curious about the relationship between you and, sorry, I've just forgotten what his name, the woman who played him up. That was pitch perfect. Like, I was just blown away. Did you guys work in tandem together, or what was your process with her?
Did we what together? Did we?
In tandem, like, did you make character decisions together, or what was your process in working with her? Because it's just, literally, that performance was just pitch perfect to me. As I was watching it, I was blown away by that. And I'm curious about your part in developing that with her.
Well, I think most of the work that I did was just writing the character. I mean, I think one of the reasons why it works was because it's one of those great things that happens when you have a character that actually turns out to be surprising, that starts in one place and then does something at a certain point that makes you go, oh, there's a whole other thing going on here. And then was just giving her broad guidance about, I don't want you to play this like some gruff battle axe, old, like, I certainly didn't want her to play it like the real woman, Kath Pettengill, who is just like, and she's had one of her eyes shot out by one of her sons and stuff, and
was the kissing written into it?
Yes.
Yeah. I was wondering whether that was something that happened when you got the band together, or was that in the script? Because that to me was such a, just knew that.
Those small things of just establishing that her hold over these kids existed on a level that was almost strange in its kind of sexually proprietorial way. It was, but we also, used to talk about the fact that, we just did it on set. It didn't seem that weird. I know mothers who kiss their sons on the lips and stuff, but I never...
Not for that long.
Maybe not for that long. What I remember thinking was weird, so we just shot that stuff and we never really talked about it that much. It just seemed obvious. I remember one thing we thought was quite strange, that when we were doing it, was that Ben Mendelsohn's first scene when he comes in, basically his first scene in the movie, he does sitting with Jackie sitting on his lap. And I'm going, okay, this is weird. I don't know anyone whose mothers sit on their laps, It's not that weird. Weirder things have happened.
Yes.
I'm just wondering, do you think it's relevant or necessary for the actors, like you talked about how Ben created that tension on set with other actors. Do you think that works better, having the actors create that dynamic in their real lives and taking that on screen, as opposed to them just acting?
No, I don't know that it's better. I just didn't have any control over it. It is one of the things with, when you get all actors, as we know, all actors are different and they have different ways of working. And one thing, when you say, for instance, you've got Ben Mendelsohn in your film, is that you're going on that ride, And there were a number of things that happened on that movie where I was just like, okay, I've lost control of this. Now I have to work out whether or not the movie's going to suffer because of it. And then in every instance, I kind of decided that no, the movie won't suffer because of it. I just need to do what I can to protect the other actors, to let them know that I'm on their side. And
but there is that kind of, going back to the theme of the weekend, the authenticity that we talked about this morning. Some of that very fractious relationships made, I think, for a certain amount of authenticity in what came in front of the camera, and there is a temptation to just push for more of that.
Yeah, I don't like doing that because I don't like actors having a bad time. I mean, I had an experience on the last movie. There was one actor who was quite disruptive, and I was worried because in the first week or two, maybe, I started to feel the energy of all the other actors start to flag. You know, they were all so excited when they turned up, and then suddenly they got a little sniff that, oh man, wow, I don't know how I'm going to work with this, and you know. But then it all came back because they end up all bonding with each other over their shared hatred of this other person.
You've got to find that authenticity one way or another. Yeah. You talked about your fascination with delusional men, and that is so tied to War Machine. And also very smartly how to transcend when you talk about a film like that, how a story like that, a moment like that in history, even if it is around a person, how do you make it go beyond the biopic of that delusional man so that it's not individual villainy where we get lost, but a critique of something larger. So would you like to tell us a little bit about your relationship with War Machine and what made you pick up that book in the first place, and then how did you approach that film?
Yes.
Thank you.
I had the short version. I had been looking for a way into a movie that might be set in one of the contemporary theatres of war, either Afghanistan or Iraq. Couldn't find it. Had assumed, given the tenor of my first two movies, that it would probably be something dirty and raw and menacing and nasty about the experience of the battlefield, but I couldn't find a story. Couldn't find any characters. And I didn't want to make that movie anyway. I thought all movies that get made about these theatres of war are that kind of movie, and they're basically kind of, they dressed up as brutal, representations of the inhumanity of man and, the experience of war. They're actually always end up being just kind of American military propaganda movies about bravery, Yeah. And so I thought, I don't even want to make that movie. And then Brad's company, Plan B, brought me Michael Hastings' book, which was about a four-star general, Stan McChrystal, who was running the war in Afghanistan in 2009, 2010. I started reading the book and then went, I think this is the movie. I think the one I want to make actually is about the delusional clowns who run this whole show. And just make it a movie about American hubris and delusion, but incorporate that stuff. It's like incorporate the stuff about the kids on the ground because they are victims in their own way. They make the movie about the disconnect between the executive level of the military and what's happening on the ground, and make it not just about how they're not talking to each other, but actually make the movie feel disconnected. Make it a tonally schizophrenic movie about buffoonery, delusional buffoonery at the top, and the brutality of the consequences of that buffoonery for the people on the ground, both civilian and military. These were the guiding principles of War Machine.
And did you, because Plan B had approached you, did you always know that Brad Pitt was going to play the general? Was that part of the deal?
I knew I was writing it for him, but I didn't know. He's never actually going to actively commit to anything without a script. So I went and met with him before I started writing, and I knew the plan was for him to do that. And it was spooky. I mean, I did quite a lot of work. I did a lot of that work I was talking about this morning of all the, I had been researching for ages, and then I was outlining, and that stuff took a long time. So by the time they came to me, I did, and I'd done the outline, I wrote the draft really quite quickly, and then I gave Plan B that first draft, and then thinking, okay, I'm just putting that in the development oven for 18 months, whatever. Brad had other movies to do and stuff. And then they called me like a week later and said, okay, so we're doing it this year and Brad's had a movie fall over and he wants to do it and he wants to do it now. And it was just like, oh, holy shit. It happened really quickly. It happened scarily quickly because it was so big.
And how do you prep for something that big? I mean, the Rover, prior to that, which I absolutely love, is such a contained film, stripped back, lean, you know. And then from Rover to War Machine. And while thematically you may argue that you're still teasing out some of the same ideas, and I would agree, but just in terms of scale and who you were working with and the number of people you were working with, where you were working, how do you as a director make that transition and still make the world feel and yourself feel, yeah, I've got it under control?
I mean, my experience of the films are all kind of the same. And, you know, I take this all the way back to the short films. You know, for me, there's a monitor and there's a camera and there's some actors and there's, you know, some heads of department that I'm talking to, and it doesn't matter if there's like, you know, we're just making it with a video camera and 10 people or there's 40 trucks in the street and 150 people. You know, it's all, my experience of it is the same. If anything, on the bigger the movie, in some ways, the easier it gets because you've got more support, you know. Your problem arises, you just throw money at it, you know. And, which can be dangerous in its way. You know, I've never failed to have an experience on a film where I haven't had to solve a problem because we don't have the money to, you know. And so in solving a money problem, I've come up with a creative solution that is better than what was there before, you know. So, but my experience of the whole machine of it is always the same. It's just...
And was making something for Netflix a different... was it in terms of you knew that this was not theatrical in the way that your previous films were, and you shot this digitally, the other two were shot film. Did that change any of in the way that you conceived the project?
No.
No?
I mean, I thought that I would have shot War Machine on film if I'd been allowed, but Netflix were like, one thing that is not negotiable is you can't shoot on film, you have to shoot 4K digital. They're future-proofing, you know. But then I made the movie and realised, I don't know that I would have wanted to do this on film anyway. It's like I shot it with 3 cameras. There were so many scenes that had at least, you know, 10 actors and 50 extras, and it's just, you know, I've been through that. I mean, I remember one of the worst nights on Animal Kingdom was a night where we were shooting just four of the family members sitting around a table in a diner at night, and it was just one scene, 4 people in a diner, an empty diner, and I took like 7 hours to shoot it, just slowly working my way around the table, you know. And by the end of it, they hated each other. They were, you know, literally one of them, they had to be held apart. One of them was disappearing off into the city at night saying, you're not seeing me, I'm not coming back and stuff. And that was my fault. I just dragged this scene out unnecessarily, you know. I didn't care how they were feeling. I was just shooting it, you know. So, you know, working my way around a room with 3 cameras was, you know, joyous. But the experience of I just shot it like it was a movie, and like, and I don't know how, you know, the first 2 movies I made were Australian movies, and then this one was with what is effectively a Hollywood studio, and I kept being told all the time by the people I was working with that you're having a really good Hollywood studio experience, and that I never heard from them. You know, they was just total freedom the whole time. You know, I kept being told that normally at this stage, if we were working with this studio or that studio, you'd be given the most annoying notes you can possibly imagine, and we'd be helping you through it, but you'd be a seething mess. And, you know, I never had any of that. I really liked working with them.
So you'd say that the scale of the film never interfered with your vision of it? In terms of, I'm talking about kind of material realities of production, because it's Plan B, because it's Netflix, because it's, you know, stakeholders very different from what you're used to with Animal Kingdom and Rover. Did you feel this was your vision of the film and that's the film you made?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, totally.
The reason I'm asking is because there's always this assumption that when you move from these very intimate small films with, 5 million scale to something that's... What was the budget for War Machine, by the way?
Well,
The internet says all sorts of things and we know not to believe it.
I don't know. It was probably about, all up.
But that means great. It was a huge budget. If a director doesn't know the budget, right, then it was a really good budget.
Well, by the budget that I had to work with, I don't know.
That's a very good place to be.
But that was the beauty of going to Netflix in the first place. When we actually developed this project at New Regency, and it became very apparent to all of us that even with Brad in it, that no one was going to make this movie because it was politically contentious, it was tonally weird, studios just don't make anything other than stupid movies now.
And it's absolutely true that because it's so much not about that war propaganda, and they would have not known where to fit it, right? Because it's not like this kind of hagiographic film or the kind of Fall of a Great Man kind of film. It's a tonally difficult film for conservative studios. So I think you're dead right that if this was your vision for the film, then it had to be in a place
we knew
where
it needed to be protected by people that were, we knew very early on that New Regency weren't going to make it. And so we thought, fuck, okay, what are we going to do? We can, Brad and I were in these pictures, right? So we can just like weirdly go around town kind of cap in hand, or we know where this is going to go. No one's going to make this, or they want American Sniper, they don't want this.
Yeah.
So we thought, let's go to Netflix. They're cashed up and they're looking for stuff, and bringing Brad into their fold would be a huge deal. Let's see what they say. And they just straight away went, yep, we want to do it. And do whatever you want,
Do you know a lot about guns?
Do I know?
Yeah, because there's so many guns in your films, and I'm always thinking like,
no,
does someone
I've never
do
shot one.
research?
I've never. All those times on set when the armourers are always there. I've never picked one up. I've never shot a gun. I've never. They're frightening things. That's why they're... I always feel, even when you're on set with an armourer and it's all safe, I still feel like I don't... Like, you do your thing, I don't want to have anything to do with that. And you can feel it when I was making War Machine, we were shooting in the UAE for most of the exterior stuff, blah, 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 and we had access to all of their hardware and, the Black Hawk helicopters and Chinooks and all that kind of stuff. It's seductive stuff. We were practically using Black Hawks as taxis to fly up and down the country and stuff. And when you're in them, there's something so seductively powerful about them. These incredible pieces of machinery, and the way that those pilots, all the people in the UAE are basically, they're all, most of them are like American pilots who are just going there for the money, and they fly them like, you go, okay, you can feel the power of that uniform. It's dangerous,
You said yesterday that there is, apart from many things you do, and different directors have different ways to keep some part of them sane, grounded. And you talked about being a meditator. And we said that it was very stupid that most people don't do it. And I thought we've got a captive crowd.
Of stupid people.
No. of people who might be inspired by you.
I don't know. It's like, you were also saying last night you
don't say anything I said.
You don't... that you don't want to sound... You don't want to be proselytizing, but because it's like, whatever. It always has made total sense to me.
I found it fascinating.
Quietening the chatter.
I found it fascinating because we were talking about director's prep, And we said, how do people prep? What is it that you do to make sure that there is a way to quieten the noise, to actually focus on doing the things that you need to get done? And I'm sure some run, some, do something else. But I do think that you need, especially, there's so much violence and brutality in the films that you're talking about and giving us access into something that's hard to watch sometimes. And I always think that your own prep of getting into that world, you would have to find ways to keep.
I don't know that the content of the movies has much part to play in that as kind of twisted as it sounds, the brutality of the movies themselves or, whatever is like, I don't experience it on set as brutal. It's fun, It's the very fact that I'm there getting to make a movie, even if it involves like blowing someone's brains out, I experience it as fun. And terror at the same time, fun terror. But it's not, I'd have the same experience if I was just shooting two people telling each other how much they love each other, I'd be having a great time and be terrified that I was making a mess of it. The meditating is, for me, just actually about everything in between the movies. When I'm working, I'm fine. I just love the exhilaration of the going on that adrenaline ride and blah, blah, blah. It's the strange, void you get dropped into when it's over. That for me is where it's good to just quieten everything down.
A couple of questions, if somebody, yes, please.
Back in the Animal Kingdom days, were your crew of similar experience, or were you surrounded by more experience in the industry than you had, and have you taken any of them with you through your career?
They were a bunch of all different people. I had probably the one who was closest in experience to me was Adam Arkapour, the DP, and that I had made my previous two shorts with a guy named Greg Fraser, who's very accomplished, and by that stage he was unavailable, and I was looking around, and I had to make that decision. Am I going to go with some kind of old guy who's because sometimes it's a delicate relationship, that one you have with the DP, because they're competing for attention. You know what I mean? They're like rock stars sometimes, and I didn't want to find myself in a kind of mentor, or a relationship with a mentor. I wanted to be there with someone who I knew was talented, but was as hungry as I was. Now, with Adam, that kind of, in some ways, presented a few problems, because I don't know that we fully trusted each other, you know what I mean? We both thought, I think you're talented, but maybe you're not. And so we were constantly second-guessing each other's choices, and, we argued a lot. And then I subsequently, I've then worked with him again on a TV show in New York, and I thought I want to work with Adam again because I just want to see if it's changed. And since then he'd shot in Snowtown and True Detective, and then we got together, and it was so much easier because we just went, okay, you're all right, I trust you. But there were other people who were, it's like I've never worked with, not by choice, I've never worked with the same DP twice. There's a couple of people I've worked with on every movie, and other people that, there's very few that I've not worked with because I just hated them. But there's a couple.
On that very honest note, I'm aware that we have to give the room up and we have another session to go to. So thank you so much, David.
The Big Screen Symposium is brought to you by Script to Screen and J&A Productions. We would like to thank our event partners, the New Zealand Film Commission, New Zealand On Air, Images and Sound, Auckland Tourism Events and Economic Development, and Stage and Screen Travel Services. Voiceover is provided by Samantha Dukes and music by Poddington Bear.